If you guys have played any amount of Overwatch since the release of Blizzard's newest low-skill hero, Brigitte, you have probably run into the popular composition in the ladder known as GOATs. Now, when I first heard people calling this team comp by that name, I was trying to figure out if it was an acronym of some kind, or if they meant GOAT, as in the greatest of all time. And when I first played against this comp, my first thought was, oh no, what have they done? But it's not the greatest team composition of all time, and the name of the comp is actually derived from an Overwatch team who made the composition popular by showing how effective it could be used, and their team name was GOATs. Now, as a DPS player, when I first encountered this comp, I thought it would be as easy as staying away from the brawl and doing free damage from afar. But I learned quickly that this doesn't work because the amount of sustain healing the comp does, in combination with its base health pool, is just too much to handle. Even when you play a Pharah or Junkrat into this comp, you need to be nearly perfect. And I really do mean perfect. I've lost to this comp as Pharah when I build a barrage literally every single team fights. And it still isn't enough. Sometimes. You have to land consecutive direct hits on a single target without missing in order to shut the comp down using Pharah, assuming you don't have a Junkrat. Which, I will admit, it's pretty hard to do with all the Lucio speed fluctuations, all the Brig stuns that knock people backwards, all the heals, and just the general manic hysteria that ensues while everyone is holding W. Soldier doesn't do enough damage into this comp, even if you have the most incredible of aim. If this comp is run correctly, you could actually make an argument that a Soldier 76 with an aimbot wouldn't make a difference. That's actually not an outlandish claim. Soldier is garbage. Rest in peace to the vanilla shooter. Sometimes, the best thing you can do into this comp is to either mirror the comp with GOATs of your own, or pull something cheesy like a Mei or a Bastion. Or, if you are an insane Widow, you could probably make it work, but you have to hit headshots really quickly early in the team fight, fairly quickly, and there's always a risk of just your team getting smothered, which is my biggest strife over this composition. I've previously compared this comp to a fat kid who beats his childhood friends in wrestling matches, but not because of his strength or his ability, but because he just sits on you and uses his weight. That's like GOATs. It's the fat kid that sits on you. Now, not that there's anything wrong with being fat, but the frustration remains, virtues aside. Now, is GOATs overpowered? No, I don't think it is, but that doesn't mean it's not frustrating. For me personally, I'm not really afraid of GOATs since I'm a really strong Zarya player and I can match nearly any Zarya in the game in that role. And if you are a DPS player, I would recommend you pick up Zarya and add it to your pool. To be honest, if you are a DPS player and you don't have Zarya in your pool, you have no idea what you're missing out on. She is basically a 400 HP plus 2 bubbles DPS hero. I mean, at max charge, she can take any hero in the game one-on-one and can literally delete a 200 HP hero from the map in like what feels. Using this hero, you can easily make up for having a bad main tank and make up for lackluster DPS on your team at the same time while peeling for your team using really well-timed bubbles. You know, I won't say that Zarya is really good at peeling, but I mean, if you're playing the right composition in your sports or Nurio, she's pretty much all around everything. She's amazing. I would say Zarya is probably the best solo carry in the whole game. Assuming you get high charge consistently. I mean, that's the trick to her. You have to be high charge. But that's really not that hard to do if you use your mic to tell your teammates to take damage for you, and you just build that energy up and up and up. Basically what I'm saying is if you run into GOATs, just play Zarya, and if you're a DPS player, just play Zarya. And an underrated thing about running GOATs is the power of decisiveness. This is huge in games at a competitive level. A lot of players in games, when they reach an ELO where they are supposed to be, they will try to play it safe for the most part and wait for opportunities to arise before making a play. Now, There's nothing really wrong with this, it's just a reality of how most players play. They tend to stray towards the safe side of things. And this is why choke points can be annoying in Overwatch. I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced this before. You know, when your team is just too afraid to push in past the choke point. One of the things that makes GOATs wonderful in this sense is that there is no thinking. This is a good thing, and I'm not being sarcastic. When you run GOATs into a passive team, they are forced to make quick decisions, and this is when players make mistakes. This is what made Dive so fun and easy to play as well. Everybody knows how to call a target and hold W and move towards it. It's universally viable and it's easy to understand. This is really good to have in the ladder, where even the simplest of strategies can oftentimes be too complex. How many times do you guys have to tell that one guy on your team to just not stagger? Too many times, I'll tell you. Too many times. Simple is usually the best. But simple should not be the best. And I'm not saying that GOATs is the best, but I do think the effectiveness of the comp demonstrates a fundamental problem that exists in the game at the moment at a game balance level. I think the tanks are overpowered. Now, some Overwatch players would argue that the tanks in Overwatch have always been pretty overpowered, more specifically the off tanks. But now I feel with the addition of Brigitte, it's now bolstered. And with Brigitte, the hero itself is easier to play than it is to counterplay. And in turn, the same thing is true with the GOATs comp. It's easier to play than to counterplay. Not a big problem, right? Maybe the comp itself isn't OP, but on most maps it's viable. That's the problem with it. It's effective on several maps and it's easy to execute. You know, these things in combination have improved GOAT's viability possibly a little too far. And now that Ana is in the meta, you know, previous GOAT counters that existed in previous patches, such as Pharah, Junkrat, also in combination with the Mercy healing, and then the Mercy healing got nerfed. So Mercy's gone now. It's even easier to hit the Pharah with Ana shots and then get cleaned up by a Diva. It just goes to show you how unpredictable the impact of some hero changes can be. They nerf Mercy and buff Ana, and in turn, that fundamentally nerfs GOAT's counters and makes GOATs even more dynamic. This is the main reason it's hard to tell how strong a hero will be when nerfs or buffs get announced, and Twitch chat goes crazy asking streamers, is this hero going to be good? Well, nobody really knows, since hero changes can directly and indirectly make other heroes that aren't even considered to be in the discussion at hand stronger via some inverse dynamic that can only be predicted in theory. And then there's the only other issue of what is good in ladder and what is good in high level semi-pro pro play. Nobody knows what hero changes might imply beyond their technical abilities. But you don't have to look very closely to see that Brigitte is what makes the comp really strong, and I'm expecting some more Brig nerfs soon. I still believe the hero is slightly overpowered, and if it's not overpowered, it's infinitely frustrating. I think it's ridiculous how she can heal targets that aren't even close to herself to almost full HP by pressing E and not having to aim. Burst healing is never a fun mechanic to have in games from a competitive sense. I mean, as far as my experience goes. I know that some of you are going to say, well then what about Ana's burst healing? Listen, that is a pretty cheap thought process, and I honestly I think you can do better than that. The difference between Ana's burst healing and Brig's burst healing, try not to look at it in a vacuum, and the two heroes are drastically different, so don't even bring that shit up in here. It's not the same at all. If we can't agree on that, we probably won't agree with anything in games or life, to be honest. I think Brig is pretty close to being balanced. We just have a little bit further to go. I do think it's strange how the hero can move so fast for what she's capable of doing once she gets close to you. She's nearly better, if not actually better, or at least more useful than a Reaper in close range combat. Like, what is that about? Like, just think about that. Like, something's not right if Brig is better than a Reaper in close range. There's something wrong with that if you just sit and think about that. There's a fundamental problem with that. That's an issue. And I think my next thoughts will be about Brig as a hero in the big picture of things. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for subbing, liking, commenting. I read all my comments. And I just want to say thank you guys once again for the support and hope you guys have a great day.